I would like to call the meeting of the Diversity Committee to order, please. My name is Blanca Lopez, and I'm the chair of the Diversity Committee. And at this time, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues who are joining me. We have Midori Valdivia, John Ross Rizzo, we have Jerry Bringman, and Neil Zuckerman will be joining us shortly. Before we listen and hear from our public speakers, I want to just recognize the fact that we just started our Hispanic Heritage Month. It started September 15th. And for those of us who are fortunate enough to speak Spanish as a second language, whether it's our primary or secondary language of birth, I would just like to say todos estamos orgullosos de estar acá y celebrar los acontecimientos de la comunidad hispana en este país. So happy Hispanic Heritage Month to everybody. And, de nada. And Tracy, are there any public speakers? Mark?
Good afternoon. We have two members of the public registered to speak today. As a reminder, we ask that all members adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. The first speaker will be Jason Anthony, followed by Althea Dupree.
Buenas tardes, Blanca, and thank you for speaking in Spanish. I was very impressed about that, and I would love to see more Latinx people in the MTA, and as well as people with disabilities, because that is very, very important. So, the Latin force in New York City is like, we are like the melting pot. That reminds us the book that Esmeralda Santiago wrote. So that's why we need more Latin folks, and most importantly, more fully bilingual folks working in our agency. So with that said, I'll wrap it up. I'll see you guys later.
The final speaker is Althea Dupree.
Thank you to the chair, Alita Dupree, for the record, she and her, with Team Folds. Talk about diversity today. How do we become the most aware of diversity? In some ways, I'm very different. I'm an ordinary user of these systems. I'm a 57-year-old Jewish disabled Desert Storm Army veteran who doesn't really meet societally established definitions. And I think we get diversity in the boardroom, but out in the field, I think there are many who don't quite know what to do with me when I appear on the scene. They don't know what to call me. Well, ask. My name is Alita, she and her. I am who I am. And so how do we as an agency overcome perhaps our cultural and our ways that we were perhaps taught by osmosis when we were young, when we are faced with new things? It's not easy being here. It's not being easy out on the system, being a person who is profoundly disabled from service in Operation Desert Storm. There are many of us out there who served, who use the system daily. And yes, I have my reduced fare Omni, so it cost me half fare to use this system with the fare capping. So I think the hallmark of diversity should be about awareness. And if one doesn't know what to do with me when I appear on the scene, just ask. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that concludes the public comment session.
Thank you to our speakers. We would like to move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. These are for the meeting that was conducted on June 26th. As everybody know, these are quarterly meetings. May I have a motion? So moved. Thank you. And a second? Thank you, Midori. All in favor? Good. Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Are there any updates on the 2023 work plan?
Yes, there are. The first thing is that we have added the DBE goal rationale 24 to 26 in today's meeting. We also moved the review of the Diversity Committee charter to December's meeting. The updated 2023 work plan is on pages 6 to 9 of the book.
Are there any comments from the committee members? If not, I'll make the motion to approve the work plan changes. May I have a second? Thank you, Midori. Everybody in favor? Thank you. Work plan approved. Tracy, can you take us through the executive summary, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Lopez. So today we're going to go over the some of the highlights for the DBE certification, the DBE goal rationale, workforce highlights, and our approach to address areas of underutilization. Next slide. I'm going to take my glasses off. I thought I could see with them. So here are our previous slide. I'm sorry, next slide. Next slide. All right, so last meeting, we, I don't know why it's jumping back and forth, Mark, right? So last year we reported, I think it was approximately 804 in utilization for MWBE. What happens is that we will run the numbers. Empire State Development will validate the numbers. And so when they went back to look at our numbers, it increased to $813 million. That was for MWBEs for last year, fiscal year 2022 to 2023. Fed's number stayed the same for DBE. And then there was an increase in disabled vets. I think the previous numbers were 33 million, and now it's 35. Now, for the DBE numbers and for the federal projects, it's not counted. However, we do track MWBE utilization. So adding that up, we come to $1.1 billion that were paid to MWDBEs, SDVOBs. So, of course, we achieved that 37%, and then 5% for disabled vets. Next slide. Okay, so we're comparing where we were last year to where we are now. And so right now for this quarter, which is April 1st of 2023 to June of 2023, so far we have paid $179 million in MWBEs awards. SDVOB, $7 million, and DBEs, that's a federal project, so it's only reported twice. So that number remains the same as the last board meeting. MTA is on track to exceed New York State goal for the 4th consecutive year. Currently, we're at 31% in utilization, 5% in SDVOB, and then the 16% for DBE remains the same. So that's a huge accomplishment to continue for the 4th year consecutively to exceed the state's goal of 30%. and we still have months left in this year. Next slide. We're noting some of the top prime awards. So for the MBE, NIA Consulting, WBE, Empire Control Abatement, $4 million. And then we had our top award for disabled vet for $809,000. Top subcontract awards. So we have a construction company that received a $14 million award, WBE that received a $14 million award, and an SDVOB. And those were subcontract awards. So doing pretty well in prime awards as well as subcontract awards. Next slide. And so these are the largest DBE awards. So there was a DBE Voltamp electrical work at $31 million. That's a huge prime award for a DBE. And then for the top subcontract award for a DBE is Northeast Steel at $27 million. It would seem to me, Ray, and I'm going to throw this to you, right, that at these top awards, and being that the DBE threshold is only at 1.3 million, you would seem to think that these awards would probably take them out of the program.
Well, these DBE firms, once certified, they have a working capital
Mm-hmm.
cap within their portfolio. And actually, Lorraine could probably speak more on that as far as certification. And a lot of these firms, if they exceed that cap, then they would be taken out of the program. But a lot of these firms have very high caps. Like Northeastern, I think they were at like 31 million or something
Okay.
like that. So they're not right now in danger of
Losing
their
certification.
certification.
Okay.
You know, they're just in a very good place right now, getting those live
No,
contracts.
it's a good thing.
Yeah,
It's a
very
good thing for sure. All right, next slide. All right, outreach. So of the 250 firms that we outreach to, that's the breakdown. How many were MWD, SDVOB, and how many had dual certification? So 73 of the 250 firms were not certified, and those are the areas that the outreach resulted in. Next slide. And Zuckerman, Board Member Zuckerman, this is a slide for you. Last time you asked about how does our outreach compare to awards that we make, right? So this is just for you, right? So, so as you can see on the commodities that we outreach, 7%, and how many awards were given to commodities, 46%. Service consulting, 73% of the firms that we outreach to were in that category. 16 million awarded to those firms. So it gives you a comparison of the outreach by awards. Now, not to say that if we outreached last month that these firms got awarded the previous month, but I think it's a very similar process and correlation that our outreach is on targeted with the awards that are being made.
Look, thank you for doing that. I'm not knowing exactly what the inputs are of this. I would have imagined there's some relationship between. If I remember the question, I think there would be some relationship between the volume of outreach and the volume of awards. So this looks like we don't have to do much outreach in commodities, and it's only one quarter, so it's probably not the right. You probably need over a number of years, but this would tell me if this one quarter is representative that a little bit of outreach in commodities creates a lot of awards, but a lot of outreach in service consulting creates not nearly as much in awards. So this would tell me that it takes a lot of effort to get awards in service consulting, or that we have a long way to go in creating enough contractors in services. Whereas I would interpret, if this is fair to interpret, I would just using this data, I would say, oh, we have a really good group of folks in commodities.
Right.
It's not hard for us to get MWBE in commodities, but it seems like, again, from this chart, it seems like it's a lot of work to get service consultant. That's my interpretation.
And so how we take
Right.
this information is that when we look at the areas that we don't get a lot of awards to MWBEs, to provide some targeted outreach in those areas, right? So there are areas that may not have a goal because there are none of the NWBEs. Yes.
Thank you so much. So following up on that, what does targeted outreach mean? I've heard this phrase a lot in the diversity committee. May I have some examples of what that looks like specifically in the service consulting industry?
So I'm going to throw that to Christine, who is over our outreach. I mean, I could start it, but I'm going to let her finish it
No
and answer
problem. It looks like the special efforts that we've made to increase information technology. If you look at our IT, where we started and where we are now, that was through targeted outreach efforts. So we had very low participation. Most of the IT service contracts went to large companies like IBM. But we did a discretionary RFP. We pre-qualified about approximately 29 vendors in various categories of consulting services. And over time, we increased participation in IT with the use of those firms. So we are attempting to do that in other areas. You may recall that we had a similar outreach efforts for legal services, and MTA's legal services has increased tremendously, and we're doing the same for A&E services.
And
You know?
so, but some of the targeted areas could be that if there is low utilization in an area, we'll contact like chambers of commerce, other groups, and try to find firms that work in that area, get them certified, and hopefully get jobs with the MTA. So when targeted, we have to go out and try to find those agencies that may encompass those firms. All right? Thank you. Thank you, Christine. Next slide. Great. Now, this is on the DBE certification, a comparison between 2022 and 2023. What it tells you is that we've increased applications from 321 to 349 as it stands now, and we decreased the time that it takes to certify a firm from 57 days down to 46 days. Great. Thank you. Next slide.
Can I ask a stupid question?
Sure.
I feel like I've never asked this in the years of doing this. What does it take to certify, and what do you do to? Is that a stupid question?
No, it's not.
No, the chief of staff just almost did a major guffaw there back there.
No, it's fine. And I'm just so happened to have my certification lead at the
Oh,
table.
the czar of certification.
Lorraine Warren. So,
All
Lorraine, why don't you quickly take us
Just,
through
just
that
like the
process?
highlights from Hamlet version. Yeah.
Well, we follow Federal Regulations 49 CFR Part 26, and we are required to complete certification within 90 days of a complete application. Okay, so it's various different components of the receipt of the application, interviewing the client, and performing a site visit, preparing the evaluation for approval or denial, and certifying the firm.
So,
once
the,
the firm,
so a firm has to be within a certain personal net worth, max of 1.3 million. They have to be ownership
yes,
and
yes.
knowledgeable of that fact. So when Lorraine talks about a site visit, they're interviewing the owner of that company to make sure that that owner is exactly.
Yes, yes. And the personal net worth cannot exceed $1.32 million.
Net worth?
Excluding, yes, excluding the primary residence. And the firm must be a small business size.
No, that's MWBE that went to 15 million,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
This is DBE federal. Thank you, Lorraine.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Can I ask one more related question? I
You're
don't know if
on
this-
a roll. Go ahead.
I don't know if you're allowed to share these stats. How often do you deny an application?
Well, last year,
Oh, is it
maybe
there?
21, we denied 2 firms.
Two out of how many?
Out of, what did we do? We
Over
received
300.
About, yeah.
And
that
what,
would-
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
What would be the reason for denial? Is it incomplete information? Is it that they weren't the owners? or
Yes,
network-
lack of expertise, and it would be that they don't meet the requirements of the regulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions from the committee?
Okay, next slide. Okay, so I thought it was important to talk about setting the DBE goal. This is a process that takes place every 3 years. So right now, we're setting the goal for 24, 25, and 26. And Christine Norman is going to give us a presentation on how that's done.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to give you just a brief overview of our requirements. So the U.S. Department of Transportation, again, through Regulations 49 CFR Part 26, requires the MTA to establish a DBE program. And with the establishment of that program, we are required to set goals for the next 3 years. Any agency or authority that receives over $250,000 in federal transit assistance funds must have a DBE program. So we have established the MTA's DBE program. Okay. We are also required to discuss with our stakeholders every year before we set forth our goal, the rationale for setting our DBE goal. So we did hold a public announcement on August 31st, and we discussed with the stakeholders, which is advocacy groups, certified DBEs, and prime contractors, our rationale for setting our goal. Okay.
I have a quick question on that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Were there any questions from
Yes.
the stakeholders with regards to that?
And they have 30 days to submit comments to us if they would like to put their comments in writing. So we've had some responses. Most have been favorable, thanking us for, establishing the goal at 20%.
I think one of the main responses was that increase the P&W from
Yes.
1.3 million, right?
yes.
Even though we have no stand on that, we, as the MTA,
Right.
suggested it went up to 1.7 million, right?
So the Department of Transportation, I believe it was last year, they recommended an increase to the DBE personal net worth. The MTA's position is that that increase doesn't go far enough to recognize the cost of living in a city like New York. And we did recommend that we propose that they increase it higher than what DOT recommended.
All right, I think that some of the responses included that there should be a multiplier for New York City. I mean, certainly doing business in New York City is much different than doing business in Boise, Idaho, right?
That is
So it should reflect that, but
Yes.
I don't know if the feds are taking that in consideration.
Well, when they initially proposed the changes to the DBE program, which hadn't occurred in about 11 years, 10 or 11 years, they received feedback from a number of advocacy groups, authorities like the MTA, and certified DB community. So this has been an ongoing conversation, and the MTA continues to advocate that the personal net worth, be considered perhaps by region or by a multiplier, and that seems to be a common refrain from the DBEs that attended the announcement. Okay? And we will share those comments when we submit our goal to DOT. Okay? All right. So we'll go to the next slide. Oh, okay. All right. So the FTA recommends a three-step process for establishing the DBE goal. Step one is calculating the base figure. So we worked with construction and development to look at our plan over the next 3 years of what contracts we anticipate letting over the next 3 years. And MTA will probably spend approximately $11.7 billion. So we look at the $11 billion, we look at the commodity codes that the majority of those contracts will fall in, and we compare that data with the availability of all firms. It's a lot of information. We use census information, and we determine the availability of all firms, and then we determine the availability of DBE firms that are ready, willing, and able to participate on those projects. Okay. In step two, the adjustment of the base figure is looking at the capacity of those DBE firms to participate in our projects, the outreach we perform. We look at our participation over the past 4 years as recommended by FTA. And that is our 4-year participation. So as you can see, in 2019, we performed 26%, 2020, 15%, in 21, 25%, and 22, 17%. Our goal for, 21, 22, 23 was 20%. All right, and so that's how we've been trending, a little up and down.
We
But-
kind of take the
Right.
two middle numbers, right?
So when we average that, we get about 19%
Right.
participation over the past 4 years. FTA also encourages us to look at our median score by repositioning the numbers from lowest to highest, and then taking the two middle scores, adding that, dividing it, and getting a number. And then we divide that number by our anticipated base number for 24 through 26. And so with that, we arrived at approximately 18%. But when we consider the fact that we have $11.7 billion in the pipeline, we determined that it would be in our best interest to maintain our 20% goal that we've had for the past 3 years. So moving forward, our goal will continue to be 20%. But in doing this, step 3 asks us to consider race-neutral measures and race-conscious measures. So race-conscious measures being the easiest to describe, and that is our goal-setting process. And so we have the ability to increase the goal where we think we'll have more participation for certain contracts, and we can adjust the goal on contracts where we think that there may be fewer opportunities for DBEs. So our race-neutral measures include our outreach, to firms, encouraging them to participate and to bid on prime contracts. It includes the utilization of DBEs by prime contractors when there are no goals assigned, or when they exceed the goals that we establish on our contracts, because then that means that prime contractors are using the best available contractors, including DBEs, and they're awarding them assignments that may be more than the goals that we anticipated, or when we didn't anticipate that there would be opportunities, those prime contractors are still utilizing DBEs. Right? And then we have our small business mentoring program, which includes small businesses that are not certified, as well as DBEs that are certified, and we are preparing them to bid on prime contracting opportunities with the MTA. We have firms that graduate from the program, and those firms bid on contracts, and they have won prime contracts in the past. And so whenever a DBE bids on a prime contract, and it's a competitive process, that reflects race neutral because they're bidding along with other firms that are not certified. Okay?
Thank you,
So-
Christine Norman.
Thank you.
And now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Green.
Good afternoon, everyone. Want to talk a little bit about the workforce side of the equation. We're going to start out talking about our employee resource groups. We have an exciting group of employees that really want to engage and become very active within the MTA. For this quarter, our ERGs, Employee Resource Groups, focus was on the MTA strategic priority, revive talent and culture, with a particular focus on retention. And we're going to just, in your books, we kind of highlighted a few of the activities that went on with the Employee Resource Groups. One, we had some leadership training for our ERG leads. The purpose behind that training was to cover leadership skills for being a responsive leader, to teach them and help them develop an alignment of the mission, vision, and purpose of their respective ERG with the MTA strategic priorities, as well as how do you measure the success of your ERG. So these are our employees that are taking on voluntary assignments as leaders, and we want to help them develop those skills and be able to speak the voice of their affinity groups and not just participate in activities and celebrations, but actually bring forth the concerns of the affinity groups that they lead. We also continue with our personal best New Year, New You theme for 2023, which was focused on emotional intelligence. This workshop covered the importance of emotional intelligence and best practices for elevating emotional intelligence in all that you do. So in the workplace, as a leader, as a colleague. So that was well attended and well received by the employee resource groups. We also have for this coming up, two of our employee groups. One is the veterans employee resource groups. They're going to have a event, suicide prevention, during the month of September. And then for our all generational employee groups, it's going to be a conversation across generations. And so that's the first of its kind for this employee resource group, and we're looking forward to bringing you some of the details from those events. Now, as was mentioned a few moments ago, it is Hispanic Heritage Month, and there's a lot of activity that's going on. We kind of highlighted this in the book for you, and we are bringing you a couple of the highlights here of some of the things that will be going on this month in Hispanic Heritage Month. We have a couple of cappuccino chats with a couple of our executive leaders. One is going to be our Chief People Officer, Hugo, and we're also going to have Demetrius over from Operations that's going to be participating in the cappuccino chat. We have this activity called Como Yo. It's actually where people want to learn conversational Spanish, or if they already have some kind of basic knowledge of Spanish, then they want to increase that knowledge and be able to speak more fluently. So we have volunteers that are working one-on-one with anyone who wants to become better versed in the language, and they will be working one-on-one. So that's one of the activities that's going on this month.
Dr. Green, and these are all virtual
Yes.
meetings? Okay.
They're virtual meetings. And it's all volunteer. There's the bilingual speakers. That's part of the Latino and Friends, ERG. They're coming on, and there's anybody that wants to learn, I'm here. And so they pair up. So now let's turn our focus to the workforce. Now, as of June 30th, this information, of course, is as of second quarter. Our MTA workforce consisted of 72,221 employees. In comparison to last year at this time, that was an increase of female representation by 580 employees and an increase of our minority representation by 1,847. As we look at our new hires as of second quarter 2023, we are actively hiring more. Our ratio for hire for females is higher than our representation. So as you can see from here, we hired 29% female and 71% male as of 2023.
So I just want to add, so of the 72,000 employees, and 50,000 of them are bus.
All right, in New York City Transit, yes.
Right, okay, all right.
So we wanted to take a brief moment to kind of give a reminder of kind of what we talked about during our last meeting, because we have 2 new board members here. So we want to make sure that as we start talking about estimated availability, you know what that is. So estimated availability is something that we use as we go through and we update our equal opportunity program. The estimated availability is looking at the internal talent and external talent available to apply for the positions that we have within the MTA. So we have some broad EEO categories that within those categories, there are numerous job titles. And as we go out to determine what should our workforce look like, or what are the numbers that we would expect to have if we are fully utilizing the diverse talent within our recruitment area. And those are the numbers that we come up with, and that's what we call our estimated availability. It's actually looking at the titles and the proficiencies and the skill sets that's necessary to fill the particular positions at the MTA. And we want to quickly kind of go over the EO categories. There are 8 EO categories. Officials and administrators, professionals, technicians. We have these all listed in our diversity committee book. But what's not there is kind of the definitions behind there and what job titles they represent. So for instance, in our officials and administrators, those would represent any position or job title that would be the equivalent of an assistant manager all the way up to the top position, the top executive position. Those would all be part of the officials and administrators category. Our professional categories would be those like the engineers and the accountants and anybody that requires a professional degree. Those would be the professional categories. And so we go on, and I'm not going to go through all of them because of time, but those are the type of positions that are in those respective categories. And then on the right-hand side, we have the type of job titles. It's just a sampling because we have lots of job titles, but those are a sampling of the job titles that are relative to those particular EO categories. So we looked MTA-wide because we do an MTA-wide Equal Employment Opportunity Program, but we also have agency-specific EO programs because as Tracy just mentioned a moment ago, each agency has a unique set of job titles that are unique for those particular agencies. So the EO categories that you would have agency-wide could overshadow. For instance, New York City Transit has 50,000 employees. So whatever's happening at New York City Transit is going to overshadow what's happening at the other agencies if we only look at it from an MTA-wide perspective. But this is the MTA-wide perspective and the estimated availability targets that we would expect as we look at it from an MTA-wide perspective.
Just a quick question, Dr. Green, I apologize. Do we ever keep track of ethnicity as opposed to race in terms of our reporting, or is it all just based on race or?
We do keep track of
Okay.
ethnicity, but we report by race.
Gotcha, thank you.
So we can get those numbers as well. So as we looked agency-wide, one of the things that we do is we keep track of our areas of underutilization. The areas of underutilization would be those areas, as we talked about the estimated availability targets. So if we estimated that we should have 15% engineers, or 15% female engineers, which would be in the professional category, and we only had 13%, then we would say that we have underutilization for female engineers or the professional category. The EO category that is labeled professional. So what we did is we went through and we looked agency-wide again. This would be different if we looked at it in the respective agencies, but agency-wide, we see that we have areas of underutilization for professionals, technicians, protective service, many of our EO categories for females. And some of this underutilization is slight underutilization. So we expect that it's going to correct itself if we continue to hire some of our vacant positions. Some of the areas of underutilization, we have drilled down to look at the particular titles within those areas and to say, what is our area of opportunity? So are we going to be hiring in these particular job titles where we see underutilization? And then we put targeted strategies together. And that is some work that's done across the agencies, starting with our people department and our recruiters and talent acquisition. We have conversations there. And so we start coming together and have conversations as to how do we put an effective recruitment strategy for those areas of underutilization. So I kind of went into the next slide. This is what we have started doing. We have identified the titles where we're underutilized in each of the respective agencies. We have started conversations with our talent acquisition and our people liaisons and our recruiters. And as we looked at the different titles where we see that there are areas of opportunity, then we have begun to say, okay, now how do we start going in, talking with our executives and with our department heads and those people who can give us some more insight as to how do we recruit more individuals that we see that we're underutilized in for those particular job titles that we will be filling within the next 6 months. And so that's where we are right now. This is our approach to address underutilization agency-wide, and we will be bringing you updates and highlights as we go through, identify those job titles, and put some of those recruitment strategies into play.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Chairman?
Thank you very much for this comprehensive report. Do we have any questions from the committee? If not, before we adjourn, I know that this is your last committee meeting as Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. And we want to thank you for all your hard work and for jumping in and doing what you do best. I don't know if my fellow board members would like to say a few words. Neil?
Look, you filled some big and decorative shoes from your predecessor, and so it meant a lot that you kept the train running on time with great passion and clarity. This is an incredibly important thing we do here and at the state level, and so thank you for your constancy and commitment.
Thank you. Great.
Anyone else? Yes? Mr. Rizzo?
I know I'm a new face here, but I just want to applaud you all for your efforts. So many thanks and best wishes.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to say it's been a ride. I've had fun, right? But I could not have done it without the staff of DDCR. And I just want to acknowledge them. Dr. Green, for your work with EEO, my right side. Christine, for your oversight with the numbers, DBE, outreach, and a newcomer, right? Thank you. Ray, with compliance and overseeing and setting the goals, kudos. George, small business mentoring program, thumbs up. And Lorraine, with the DBE certification, keep up the good work. And I think Medallia is out there with outreach. Thank you. So, yes, thank you. Excuse me? And all the agency EEO officers. I mean, that's a job in itself. And the guys and women who perform that task, that's a lot. And in my previous role as director of EEO, I know the passion that goes into that job, and it's hard. And thank you for all that you do. Thank you, MTA.
And thank you, Tracy, for your leadership. And with that, I would like to adjourn our meeting. May I have a motion and a second, please? Thank you. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.